Trust in government and trust in the media are the bedrocks of a working democracy. True democracy requires the freedoms of speech and expression to allow individuals and the media to hold our government to account. However, an AUT research report found that trust in mainstream media has plummeted to 33%, while 3/4 of people actively avoid reading the news. There are accusations that the mainstream media are biased in their reporting, telling people what to think rather than reporting on the facts. Governments of all stripes are increasingly using urgency to pass legislation. How can we even expect people to trust in governments that bypass the usual checks and balances? For a society to continue to achieve progress and prosperity, we need to get better at working together with people of different perspectives and different points of view. We need to find our common goals and shared visions. Joining me today is Tim Wilson, a seasoned journalist whose work has been featured in the New York Times and The Guardian. He was also the former US correspondent for One News and a roaming reporter on 7 Sharp. Today, he is the director of the Maxim Institute think tank. So we've had this term, the fourth estate, thrown around here and there, especially in the last 6 to 12 months. And I kind of want to understand from your point of view, Tim, what is the fourth estate? Why do we care? And what happens if it's gone?
Can you tell me what the first 3 estates are?
Okay, I believe it is the executive.
Right. So we're talking about parts of government, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the government, the Parliament, and
the judiciary. Okay.
Yeah.
And the fourth estate is then seen as, is there a fifth estate, Nina?
I don't know. Is there?
Okay, we'll just keep moving. The fourth estate, I guess, is seen as playing a role in good government. So the fourth estate is supposed to hold the executive, Parliament, and the judiciary to account in some way. We're seeing a change in the way that's occurring, and there's a lot to go into there because there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening, but we do need to hold institutions to account. There's no question about that. I think the issue is, how do we do it? And is it being done?
What we're seeing in the media a lot in the last couple of months especially is essentially like the fall of the media in terms of our major news broadcasters, the crumbling of News Hub, and I think TVNZ is also, losing quite a few people as well. Under huge financial pressures. And, how do we, to your best understanding, because I know you've worked in TVNZ, you've worked as a journalist, all around the world, mainly the US and New Zealand. To the best of your knowledge, why has this happened, and is there anything we could do about it?
Yeah, look, I come from Nina, I'm old, so I come from a long history. So I actually started. So what's happening is we're seeing the. It's not the end, but it's the beginning of the end of free-to-air broadcast TV.
Oh, no.
And, I think, how often do you watch the news?
Okay, look, I don't really watch the news that much. I read the news.
Exactly.
I actually
read the news probably beforehand, right? And I guess the other question is, how much linear TV do you consume?
Not a lot. I think that TV that we've got is not even connected to the aerial.
It's plugged into a device.
The internet. It's plugged into the internet.
Yeah. So I guess I started out, just to give a bit of context here, I started out in magazines. So I came into magazines when they were just coming off a boom. So magazines like Metro, magazines like North and South, and there
Can I ask when that was? Dare I ask?
Okay, so that was sort of, let's see, I would say the boom years were in the early 80s, and the boom was, magazines were such a platform, a desirable platform, that I used to hear sort of stories that the sales guys would call up the editors and say, look, we just sold another 10 pages of advertisements. Can you get the journalists to write longer stories? And they would do it. because that was how the business model worked. And then tastes changed, as tastes often do, and they started to, magazines weren't as popular. So I guess I've been through, and look, got made redundant twice from magazines. The second time, well, the first time it really hurts. And I really have a sympathy for those people who are being told your job isn't needed anymore. And particularly, I think with TV, there is the temptation to see yourself as your job. Your identity becomes the work you do. And that's always dangerous because we're just inhabiting roles. Your job is a job.
It's not who you are.
It's not who you are. But I guess
I see a lot of journalists today, and they really, what's the word? They sort of almost like sell their face. They really put who they are into their work.
And that's a good thing. But I think in terms of TV, I would say that's an occupational moral hazard of being in TV. So I came from print, so I never wanted to be in TV. I used to sort of affect this disdain about TV people.
And then why did you join them?
With their shallow aphorisms and their glimmering suits and all their money. Oh, I didn't want to be like that. I was in journalism for truth. But then I got broke in New York and the phone rang and they wanted someone. And the person who answered, i.e. me, wasn't the someone they wanted, but I needed to make some money. So they said, sure, go and do it. And that's how I ended up in a studio overlooking Times Square at some unearthly hour on a New York morning, talking to the late news that just recently got shut down.
Who were you working for at the
time? I was a freelance journalist. So I was living in a place called Bushwick. There was a rapper called Bushwick Bill.
Never heard of him.
So Bushwick was a rough and tough area. There used to be a traffic island that every Sunday without fail there'd be a burning car on that traffic island just outside our front door because the car would have got stolen and torched. I was living there because I was broke. And so this is quite a long story, so I'll just summarize. It's like someone came over who was more successful than me and they had a mobile phone and they said, you know what? I'm going back to New Zealand, but you keep paying the mobile phone and you'll have a mobile phone. I was like, wee! and the phone rang one day and they said, is Lauren there? I said, no, she's not. And there was this voice that I recognized. It was actually the broadcaster Pam Corkery. I said, do you want a journalist? And she went, yeah. I said, I'm a journalist. And she was like, who are you? And I said my name. And she's like, oh, yeah, I've read some of your stuff. Oh, you might do. And then that's how I found myself doing a TV live cross.
Oh, right. And you were the US correspondent, right?
Well, this was even before that.
Oh, right.
This was, no. I mean, yeah, this was just way before that. So this was essentially my audition. And because they didn't have many people with a New Zealand accent on the east coast of America, they called me up 2 weeks later and we did it again and again and again. And finally, I was then at one point, Bill Ralston was the head of News and Current Affairs, had come into News and Current Affairs. He used to be the editor of Metro magazine, so I knew Bill professionally. He said, do you want to give it a go, being the US correspondent? I was like, sure, I got nothing else on.
What time period was this?
My first gig for TVNZ as the correspondent was in 2004. From memory. And that was the inauguration of George W. Bush Jr. the second time around. And I was useless. I actually FTD'd, failed to deliver because I hired a mate. I didn't really have a plan B, et cetera, et cetera. But Bill was, he was a mentor to me and he gave me a second chance and I didn't blow it. Anyway, sorry, that's a long story. The point being, I guess I've come through, I came through magazines and I saw those decline and journalism has just gone somewhere else.
Where was it before and where is it now? I mean, I want to talk a little bit briefly about this book that I read a little while ago. It was called Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy.
Yeah.
And
I'm not comfortable with the word woke.
Yeah, because
I feel like it's a bit of a smear.
It is.
Can we just use middle class Marxists?
Yeah. So anyway, it's called Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. So the wording of the name is a little bit like problematic. But I came across this book actually through an RNZ interview with Jesse Mulligan. He was interviewing the author, and I thought this person's really interesting. So her name's Bhatia Unga Sargon. She identifies herself as a left-wing populist and a Marxist. So she's a journalist herself for Newsweek. Yeah. And so what she was finding was that actually...
I did a job for Newsweek once.
Well, she was finding that, the left and right divide, like it doesn't really work. It doesn't really, actually look at working class issues in terms of...
Oh, that's interesting, because the left have adopted the identity politics matrix.
Exactly.
Which is not socioeconomic.
Exactly. So both
identity comes from something else.
Yes, and the idea that both the left and the right have somewhat to a degree actually left the working class people behind. The left more so. She was talking... I mean, this is all the context of the US, but... and this is... what's feeding into my ideas about, what's actually happening in terms of the trust in the media, right? So she was talking about how over time there's more of a sort of a liberal elite within journalism. And I guess I want to ask you, like, what are your thoughts on how journalism was in the US? Because you were saying that a lot of people who were going into journalism were more liberal elites who came from middle-class backgrounds.
Well, this is, I think...
educated. They were more educated.
Educated. And... I don't think this is unique to the United States, because I went over to New York to get a job on the New Yorker magazine. It was a magazine I venerated. All I had to do was show up, be brilliant, and they'd hire me.
Yep.
Can you possibly imagine anything more naive? But I did it, and guess what? They didn't hire me, and so I had to make a living. But what I saw when I was over there was that how the internet just destroyed this class of people who made their living from freelance print media. Yeah,
because people stopped buying newspapers.
Yeah, they stopped buying newspapers. They stopped buying magazines, and it started to migrate to, I would say, broadcast was still strong. I think radio's probably the last of legacy media. That's still strong because it's an immersive medium, not a medium that requires your full attention. So you can have the radio on, like this podcast. So people are listening to us probably while they're washing the dishes.
Yeah, exactly.
Doing the vacuuming.
Walking the dog.
By the way, you missed a bit. Go back. Your partner's going to get angry. Walking the dog, etc. The conversation goes on. It's in people's heads. But with something like TV, that demands both your full attention. It's the same in a sense with newspapers. You can't drive the car while you're reading a newspaper. You can't drive the car while you're watching TV. You can do it while you're listening to radio. So all of these changes are occurring. And your question, what's happening with journalism? My impression is that it's going to other places. Now, are those healthy places? Is that a positive thing?
I think what I'm concerned about is that young people are more and more disengaged from, our mainstream media, and then the people who, dare I say, the people who would have been watching things like the 6 o'clock bulletin are, probably the older people, and our older people, they pass away, and we do have an aging population, but eventually they pass away, and young people coming through just aren't really engaging that much with mainstream media, and they are getting their news from social media. The thing I want to bring about with the book Bad News,
you're talking about liberal elites, right?
Yes, about liberal
and professionalization,
elites.
Education,
exactly.
Look,
and the idea, did you, with your route into journalism, did you go to university for that, or did you just how did you get into it?
I got into journalism because I loved writing. I loved reading and I loved writing, and I wanted to find a way to make that pay.
Did you have to go to university for
this?
I
went to university. I majored in American poetry at Auckland University, which is what a fantastic way to set yourself up for a career. And once I graduated from that, I ended up being a nighttime taxi driver in Auckland, working for Alert Taxis, because I found that living on the dole wasn't getting me much money. So I did that, and I wrote a piece about being a nighttime taxi driver for a writing competition held by Metro, and I co-won it. And so when someone on North and South very explicitly told the editor what they thought of her, and their services were no longer required, they gave me a call. So that's how I did it. And at that time, there weren't really, there was sort of like I think there was a journalism course at AUT. It wasn't professionalised. It's not like the comms degrees we have now. So, and journalism was quite different. It was a place for ragamuffins, outliers, malcontents, people who couldn't actually live in the real world. But there was a sense too that these people were disagreeable. I fear that the professionalisation of journalism has created a collection of agreeable people who just want to pay off their student loan, don't want to stand out. I think that's had an effect on the kind of material that's being produced.
Oh, that's concerning. So as in, do you mean that like you're more likely to...
I want to fit in. I don't want to stand out because I want to hang on to my job, because the business model is shrinking.
And what do you think the impacts are on that and the role as the fourth estate?
Well, as the fourth estate, there should be a spectrum, for example, of ways to understand the world. So that could be, and I'm not in love with using the terms left and right, because I think they're actually quite blunt instruments, but let's use them for a bit. There have been polls that say a significant proportion of journalists view themselves as centre-left. There are much fewer journalists who would say they would be of a conservative approach. And so when you have that, situation, you're not getting a diversity of an intellectual diversity of views. So if that's not happening, you're not getting friction. You're not getting arguments in the newsroom. You need friction. Well, I'd like to agree with you, but I disagree, so that we can have some friction. Sorry, dad joke. But so I think that's sort of, if you have consensus in the newsroom, you've got a problem.
From the book that I was reading in Bad News, they were saying one of the problems in journalism is that it used to be very much a working class kind of job.
It's a trade.
It's a trade.
It's a trade. It's like butchery. Seriously, it's not. It is not a like who, when, where, how, when. Oh, sorry, why. The why.
And it
important.
Should be about facts in terms of reporting. This is what happened.
Yeah. And look, everyone's going. I mean, there is the. I think it's important to attempt to be objective, absolutely. But if you bear your prejudices, then people can factor that in. But if you conceal your prejudices under the guise of objectivity, then people can smell something. And hence you've got, I do see the rise in distrust of media has been because media often presents itself as being objective, but they aren't. And we saw that particularly in a lot of the COVID response. We've just actually, at Maxim Institute, where I now work, we put out a paper on trust and the erosion of trust. And there's been a significant decline post-COVID response, but we'll get to that later. Tell me a bit more about Bad News. So this person says that there's not enough
there's not enough variety and diversity in thought, really, and diversity in background in the people who are becoming journalists in today's mainstream media.
Oh, interesting. Diversity of background. So where are they from?
So she was saying, because it's so expensive to study journalism and live in the cities where the mainstream media is, and they get paid so poorly that for anyone to really think of pursuing a career in journalism, families. Kids from well-off families who go to Ivy League elite universities, who tend to, I guess, be quite liberal and left-leaning. And I say this being somebody who I do identify as left of centre, right? But I also value the idea of actually having diversity.
But I'm glad we're talking.
Well, I think it's important that we have a diverse, perspective on things as well. I think that's as important as diverse backgrounds. But I think what they're seeing in the US is you're getting a lot of your middle class liberal elites coming through like the elite colleges, and then only the ones who have
into the few remaining legacy media jobs.
And they're often like the coastal places like New York, LA, and then so to live there on the tiny amount of money that they get paid as starting off journalists, they often have to rely on their trust funds and parents' help and all that. So you end up selecting for people who are from privileged backgrounds, but also identify as a liberal elite. And I guess it just goes back to the zooming out to the whole left-wing liberal people are less and less representative of actually the working class people.
The working class,
left is supposed to be.
Can I just name like where I'm from? So my father was a Presbyterian minister, and he used to be so proud of telling us I earn exactly the medium wage. And I got myself into trouble at university, sort of ran a bit short of money, and he sent me a $300 check, and I tore it up because I wanted to be someone who could look after myself. And I mailed it back to him, and he said, "You know what? There was 7 cents stamp duty on that check. I'm out 7 cents." So I'm just saying that my trajectory is very different, perhaps, to some other people who might be in journalism now.
And I think the reason why I think we should have more diversity of perspective, as somebody who's centre-left, I think we should have more people who are right-wing around in the conversation, is that it's all about checks and balances, right? Because if everyone
this
in the room...
goes back to the Fourth Estate, right?
Because if everyone in the room agrees on everything, then when something is actually really wrong, who's going to be there to hold them accountable? Not necessarily accountable, but point things out that actually maybe what we're doing is not good.
And I guess the worry too is that there used to be a cohort of chain-smoking older journalists with half-empty bottles of bad scotch in their lower drawers who would tell the younger journalists, "Oh, why are you getting worked up about this? This happened 10 years ago. This is something that regularly happens." I think also the danger, as we're seeing traditional journalistic platforms collapse, is that those older voices, they're too expensive. So we'll just gas those guys, and then we'll have younger people taking care of younger people. And look, I'm not saying that there aren't very thoughtful younger people, but there is a benefit to experience. And like when I came on to North and South, I had Pat Booth, who was a journalist who broke the Mr. Asia story and pursued it. And he was the guy that looked after me, and he kicked my butt. So did Robin Langwell who was the editor. So those people scolded you into being accountable for your views. If you have people who agree with your views, they're not going to hold you accountable for those, the soft sort of fuggy bits that don't quite work. It's like, oh, that's all right. You're a good person. Guess what? I'm not a good person, and I need someone to hold me to account. So thank you to those who have.
I want to bring it back to your time in the US. So based on your experiences there, what was journalism like in the early 2000s in the US, and where do you think things have gone now? But I want to bring it back to the 2016 Trump election, I guess.
Sure.
Because, another thing that they talk about in this book, Bad News, was that a lot of the mainstream media, especially the ones that were left-leaning, were reporting that, it was impossible that Trump could become the president. There's no way he could become the president. Everything is saying he's not going to be the president. It's going to be Hillary. It's going to be a woman. It's going to be grey. It's going to be Democrat. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then obviously Trump did become the president in 2016.
Turned upside down. Can I just pull back and say, I think what we're talking about is free-to-air linear TV, so broadcasting, and so that's I think there's two things. There's the content, which is what you might call journalism, and there's the platform. There's the plate it's served on, and that was probably a lot more. So the plate now is broken. It's clear. And I think we could probably say, in some sense too, some of the content or the way that TV tells its stories needs to change a bit because tastes are changing. So
in what way?
I think social media has there's this sense of, well, what does social media, the algorithm rewards extremity, personal stories, things move very quick. It's a lot briefer.
Yeah.
So the attention spans have contracted for a variety of reasons. That dopamine hit, you scroll, when you go.
The death scroll.
The death scroll. Yeah, it's like, what am I, not funny, not sad, not serious. It's just,
And then it's like once you spend a bit more time watching one video, then the algorithm sends you more of the same more of the same, but more extreme and more extreme.
Yeah. Do you like hate watch things to fox the algorithm?
I haven't gone out of my way to do that.
I do, because I don't want a collection of servers in Sweden thinking that they know me.
Yeah.
They don't know me.
You gotta be unpredictable.
No, I just don't want to be second guessed.
Yeah.
And also, I want information to come outside of the sphere.
Things to challenge your own perspective.
Yeah,
and
I
deliberately,
deliberately, and this is something I suggest that everyone does, follow people you disagree with, and then like their stuff. Don't hate follow them so you can do snarky little comments like, "Oh, I'm so smart." Don't do that. Actually like it. Chew on it. Talk with your mates about the stuff that they're saying, because something that we need to be able to do better is disagree agreeably.
Yeah, do you think we've become in this world where we're going to be more tolerant, we become intolerant of different ideas and different perspectives?
Yeah, I think we definitely have. And I guess in a way part of too, if we look at the recipe on social media, it's all personal. So it's all about, this is about me. So we've personalized ideas. So if I disagree with you, Nina, that means I'm not actually disagreeing with an idea you ventured. I'm actually attacking you and offending you.
Disagreeing my existence.
Yes.
I'm
actually trying to cancel you. I'm not. I'm just disagreeing with you. And I may be making errors when I do it. And I hope you can pick them out so that we can actually encounter that odd thing called the truth together.
What do you think about, the argument that people who are against cancel culture are just, old men on their soapbox, raising their fist against the clouds?
Sure. Well, I actually
who just want it back in the old ways.
No, I actually see a lot of people who aren't that stereotype that you described, who are concerned about quote unquote cancel culture and the inability for us to have a conversation. I think I know that disagreeable conversations are a huge part of, we go back to democracy. That's how we decide, why is the executive important? What role does Parliament play? What should the judiciary be doing? Should it be activist? Should it not be activist? Let's discuss it. Let's talk about these things. Let's not cancel people who say disagreeable things.
Well, why do you think this has happened? Like, where has this all come from?
That's a huge question. Where do you think it's come from?
It is a huge question with very complex answers, I think.
Yeah.
I think my opinion on it and my ideas have been changing a lot. I think one of the things that I'm concerned about is our education system, really, in terms of, are we actually preparing people to think critically? I think I was really lucky with my upbringing. So, we can probably segue into like my family story, I guess. So I've known about my family for a while, but I think I've been thinking about it a lot more recently because, your whakapapa, your genealogy, and it has so much impact on who you are and where you are in the
really
world
does.
right now, hugely.
Yeah.
The decisions that my parents made to move to New Zealand, huge. Like I can't even imagine what my life would have been like.
But even
if I'd grown up in China.
Even genetically, you have a whakapapa.
Yeah.
So I mean, I say this as an adopted child I've been in touch with my birth mother and found my birth father too. Just recently he's passed away. But when I met my birth mother and hung out with my her other kids, let's put it that way, I looked at my brother Stephen's legs, her son Stephen's legs, and I'm like, those are my legs. I'm like, you poor devil. But But so there's a whole lot that's programmed into us, not just by experience, but also genetically. Anyway, sorry.
Well, we can talk about that in a bit, but in the context of critical thinking and all that, so my parents grew up in China. I think my dad was born around the time of the Great Leap Forward. He certainly lived through the Cultural Revolution.
He survived both the Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So they moved to New Zealand in the early 90s. They met at work, and my mum, I don't know, I think that's when China started opening up. My mum saw magazines of what it was like in the outside world, and my dad was like, oh, this is great. And then so they looked to leave China. They looked to go into the US, Japan, Australia, and then New Zealand was actually the easiest one for them to come to. And my dad's very pleased that he came to New Zealand in hindsight. And what's interesting is that I had always thought that my dad was always anti-Chinese Communist Party. Like I thought he was always like that. Like I thought this started way back when he was in China. He didn't even realize the extent to how bad things were until he came to New Zealand. Right. And this goes back to what we were talking before about, does a fish know that they're wet? Do we know what it's like to be in a free society?
What are the waters we're swimming in?
Do we know what it's like to be in a free society? And do we not know that until we actually experience what it's like to not be in a free society and have that, what's the word, like battle of ideas, right? So I think about the reason why I think about my family is that my dad, when he was 6 years old, I think he's one of 5 or 6 siblings, I always forget. And his father passed away when my dad was 6. Wow. I think this was during the Cultural Revolution. Anyway, it was a time of famine and rationing, and I think my granddad lost his ration book, and then he was too proud to, share rations with the rest of the family, or like borrow and whatever, or admit.
I'm sure there would have been penalties. It's
losing
like you
face,
lost your ration,
right?
Yeah, but you lose your ration book.
Yeah, exactly.
In that kind of environment, you don't get another one.
Yeah. So my granddad actually died of starvation when my dad was 6 years old. I think my dad even found my granddad, when he was 6 years old. So I'm just like, this is bonkers, and I think more
this
and more.
This is a world we can't even imagine.
Like in New Zealand, you just cannot even imagine. So when I see the way the world is going, I think so much more about the life that my father had when he was growing up. And my father, he's just such a beautiful human, going through all of this stuff. And he's great. He's so warm. He's like, not like, the stereotypical like Asian parent kind of thing.
I couldn't possibly comment.
But I've learned so much through him about what it's like to not be free and what it's like to not have freedom of speech. And I've been learning more and more about what things were like back then. And it kind of relates to how things are working right now, because I feel like more and more there's a pressure to have one way of thinking, that one way is right, and this is the way that's better for us because it's more progressive and it's more well-meaning and well-intentioned, and that's why it's better. Yeah, and compassionate, exactly. Yeah. And I reflect on the early stages of the Chinese Communist Party and how things came about, because, the whole of the 20th century was terrible for Chinese people, whether it was during the time of the Chinese Communist Party or before. It was all pretty bad, right?
I think we can agree that Chairman Mao didn't help things a great deal.
He didn't help things, that's right.
How many? It was like
millions
30,
and millions
30
and
million
millions.
people died in the famines of the Great Leap Forward.
We really don't know, right?
We'll
never know how bad it was.
That area,
it's in the millions, definitely.
Tens of millions.
And we have to think about how the Chinese Communists came about, the Chinese Communist Party, like how they came about and how they overthrew the previous government. And it was, a time where it's essentially like it was a republic, but it was like a feudal sort of state where, you had a few people who were landowners who were very rich, and you had a lot of really poor people, right? And then the movement...
Sounds suspiciously like the oligarchy that exists in China today.
Yeah.
Just different window dressing.
Exactly. But they were able to radicalize a lot of really unhappy, poor peasant people into this movement for communism, the idea that, we can own the means of our production and share better, right? Yeah. And they thought that they could do that, but obviously that never really happened. It was never going to actually share things equitably or equally or whatever. There was no way that was going to work. And all of this wealth and resource was taken by force, and a lot of people died for this. And then I think a lot about, I think prior to the Cultural Revolution was when they had the time of like the Red Guards. So these were students, university and high school students who were radicalized by this idea that we need to have like a new future. We needed to burn down the past and start anew. So there was a lot of
Old
burning.
people are the problem.
Yeah, old people are the problem. We need to get rid of books. We need to burn
Did it start with
history.
people saying, okay, boomer? Or... No, but here's the thing. There's this whole demographic friction. Like, what is it? Boomers don't like millennials. And they forget about the in-between, Gen X, the generation that hovers between both, judging both of them. I'm kidding. I'm a Gen Xer. I don't. But I think that all of those modes unravel society. I mean, we forget that so-called boomers, they have grandchildren who are millennials. I don't know any grandparent who hates their grandchildren and wants to take stuff away from them. In my experience, my observation, grandparents actually give grandkids whatever they can. So all of those narratives, and the narrative you're describing about the Red Guards and other generations, we are seeing aspects of it in our own society now.
It's a way more extreme version, but we have to be careful of it, right? So like there were students who were radicalized.
Ideas have consequences.
The students who were radicalized, wanted to change things for progress, burned a lot of books, burned a lot of our history, wanted to completely get rid of Chinese history, right, to start anew. A lot of academics and intellectuals were killed. Like hundreds of thousands of people were killed, and so, like it's cancel culture to the extreme, right? And I guess I wonder, I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're anywhere near what happened in China.
Not the extremity.
I recognise that there are some patterns of this radicalisation that we need to burn it down essentially in terms of we need to. Fire this person or fire that person because they have a slightly different viewpoint on a topic, right? Yeah. And I was reading recently in China that there was some professor, I think the last couple of years, who was trying to teach about the Cultural Revolution in the universities in China, which I thought was pretty brave considering anything that's like...
asking for trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And then she thought that she was able to do it in small classes with trusted students. But obviously the students were like, actually, no. And then they all basically cancelled her, made complaints, and then she had to leave the country.
Wow. Yeah. Look, those... obviously, it's not... Well, I think there are certain things that you can and can't say in academia at the moment, at present.
Another thing about what happened with the famine in China. So
this is the Great Leap Forward.
I can't remember which one, but there are several famines that have happened. And my dad was telling me that there was a time where, in that movement, it was like, oh, peasants know best, the working class people know best, blah, blah, blah. And so they asked the peasants in the countryside to figure out how can we increase our yield of grain. And then, we'll reward the ones who know best and we won't challenge it. We just know that you guys will know best. And everything was very corrupt. So you had peasants who, they knew when the party officials were going to come visit. So they were like, oh, okay, how are we going to win this prize? And so before they come, what they would do is they would dig up wheat and then they'd plant it all together with wheat that was already grown there to make it look.
They juice the numbers.
They juice the numbers. They play the game. And then so you'd get these officials coming and be like, oh, wow, you guys are great. You guys have figured it out how to grow more grain per square meter or whatever. And then so they were like, okay, well, if the peasants can make this much grain in this much square mile or whatever.
Oh, you all have to make this much grain.
Yeah, then you guys will all make this much grain. And then so they way overcalculated how much they were actually going to be able to grow. And then that's caused the famine because they didn't actually grow as much as they thought they would. And then who did it hurt the most? The peasants, because the peasants had to keep sending everything to the city. And so people in the city starved, but not like the people in the countryside. The people that they intended to help the most were the people who were punished the worst.
Lies have consequences too.
Yeah. There's so many examples of how, the lack of being able to have free speech in China seriously impacted people a lot. It's just you just don't know what it's like when that's gone. Yeah.
And I think that's we're talking about trust in media earlier, but that we're also seeing trust in governments declining. What is it? 45% of New Zealanders, and this is from a parliamentary survey, don't believe that the government can accurately represent the needs of all New Zealanders. And that's
Is that from like post or pre-election from the most recent?
I'm quoting from paper we just did on trust at Maxim Institute. So my suspicion is that data was out before the election, but that's from Parliamentary Survey. I can double check on that. But it's something that is huge, and we need to attend to it. I mean, the other thing that we're talking about the media a bit, but also we look at government, the overuse of urgency, which is where you declare that there's an emergency, so we have to push legislation through Parliament without the usual checks and balances, select committees, etc., just to get it done.
That was the previous government and this current government, and I just don't understand why we don't know what the meaning of urgency is anymore.
Well, because it's expedient. The overuse of urgency in an environment when people aren't trusting the institutions of government, etc., the politicians, that's problematic. And it fits in with, we were talking earlier about the Fourth Estate, declining trust there. So declining trust in the ability of the media to hold those institutions and the people in them to account. That's all part of this. But I don't want to get into the whole crisis mode. One of the most overused words at the moment is crisis, because that forces us to go, oh my goodness, well then we must use urgency because there's a crisis. Well, it goes back to that generational sense of, the journalist with the Rothmans smouldering out of their gob and the sort of half full glass of scotch going, this isn't a crisis. I'll tell you about a crisis.
I'll show you a crisis.
Yeah, I'll show you a crisis.
I guess what I'm worried about with the declining trust in government, that I don't think you have to be left or right, but you can just think,
well, it's been well documented.
It's the idea that if we become more and more distrustful of the government, we don't believe in what the government is doing or saying, then it creates an environment where people are more likely to, have a revolution or rebel.
Yeah, or disengage.
Or disengage, which is dangerous too.
I think that's more because New Zealanders were quite apolitical anyway. And I actually, having lived in the United States, having lived in New Zealand, I do feel somewhat positively about our apolitical nature, because politics hasn't colonized everything in the way that it has in the United States. And I think if you start to look at every situation as being freighted with a political meaning, that someone's either expressing, left-wing views or right-wing views, then you're going to actually misread what's happening. And so I quite like in New Zealand the fact that we only probably care about politics for about 2.5 weeks before an election. I like that, but also it does make me worry because we need to be more connected to it. So
I think so. I think we need to be more engaged with politics, more than just, in the election year. We have to be aware of what's happening. And one of the things that I'm concerned about with the role that media plays is the way that sometimes they shape stories to make you think a certain way rather than presenting the facts. So I'll bring it to the topic of structured literacy. So this government has decided that they're going to make it mandatory for all schools to teach literacy in terms of structured literacy, which is much more of a phonics-based way. And when I hear about it, I'm like, I'm fairly certain that's how I learned how to read, which is looking at the letters, figuring what sounds they make and how those sounds make words and words have meaning. And as opposed to having schools pick and choose from, say, balanced literacy, which involves literally teaching children how to guess the word, which I think is bonkers. And it's somehow become like a left and right way of thinking, as if like structured literacy is, oppressive because it's like too structured and children aren't structured. So why would you make them do that? And, we child facilitated, child-led learning and blah, 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 blah. But to me, I'm like, actually, structural literacy is the most evidence-based way to teach children education, how to read.
Yeah, and I think that one of the things we've been looking at Maxim Institute is the curriculum, and it's not content-rich, which means it doesn't offer actually really detailed ways to teach stuff. It's like, oh, well, teachers, they have to, they almost have to create their own curriculum. Now, that gives good teachers great freedom, which is fantastic. But it also means that teachers who might be new, who are struggling, they have to do curriculum creation as well as teaching.
Well, there's a report that came out today by Aero that I think there's, most teachers, or a significant proportion of new teachers right now don't feel prepared to manage the classroom.
And I sympathise with teachers. This is not something that...
well, I don't think we're training. We're setting them up for failure is what I'm saying.
And that's well, I think the other thing to the content-rich aspect, it's really interesting, our PISA scores, which is... international measurement of how we do in literacy and numeracy, have been declining since the late 2000s, which is when we abandoned a content-rich curriculum, and they've been going lower and lower and lower. And I think you're right about teacher training as well, because there's been a lot of theory introduced into teacher training as opposed to actually how do kids recall, how do kids apprehend things, recall them, and then manage to repeat them 20 minutes later. And there's not that same support in teacher training, and that's another huge area that we've identified. The conversation we were having earlier about the professionalization of journalism, where people are taught the theories of journalism and what structural imperatives are happening here, etc. That doesn't help people create good journalism. It doesn't train them to be disagreeable, to ask the follow-up question, to be uncomfortable. And I think what we've done educationally here, I'm not saying actually that we need one or the other. We probably need a bit of both, content-rich as well as children-led. But anyone like my wife and I, we have 4 kids. And if we ran the home according to what they want, it would be even more of a damn circus than it is right now.
18-month-old, let them decide.
Yeah, let's let Otto run the show. Actually, that would be fun for the afternoon.
The point why I brought it up was that I saw an Instagram reel, and the title, and it was about the whole structured literacy rollout, and the title was something like "Government to tell teachers how to teach" or something, and I'm like, that really boiled my blood, because it frames it really negatively.
It frames it paternalistically. It's like, we're telling you what to do.
Exactly.
It's like, no, we're going to give you another tool.
Yeah.
This is the way I would hope it would be presented as. And I know that
there's so many different ways it could have been worded. New literacy tool, like you say, or evidence-based literacy to be rolled out.
Studies show that content-rich students. There are correlations between students in content-rich curricula and improvement and doing better.
But I think the problem is that when you have a policy that's been put out by one type of government and other people are sort of primed.
It gets politicised.
Yeah, it's politicised because people are primed to disagree with it because it comes from a party that they disagree with. And look, I don't know if I'd ever consider myself right-wing ever in my life, but they say people are left-wing when they're young and they become more conservative as they get older. But you know what I mean?
Some views of conservation. No, you were saying I want to conserve things. Now, I think I don't, and it's almost I don't. Again, I don't think that it's productive to say left or right, or even the word conservative. But if you think about being a cultural ecologist, so what do ecologists do? They say that there are good things in the environment that we want to hang on to. That's what I would say I am. I'm a cultural ecologist, a cultural and social ecologist. There are good things in our social arrangements.
You're a social conservationist.
I am. Yeah. I mean, if you want a name call, you can call me something else. But I think you're getting closer, Nina. I'm just saying. I'm getting some social conservationist vibes here.
What does being conservative mean to you? Could you explain to us? Because I consider myself very socially liberal. You love who you want, all that kind of stuff. Be who you want. Express yourself in the way that you want, as long as it doesn't hurt other people. That kind of thing, right? So what does being conservative mean to you?
Well, to the point that we were joking about earlier, it's about being a conservationist. There are goods in human history that we want to preserve, don't we? So at number one, it means having an understanding of history, not just saying like the Red Guards, this is a whole new world. We're just gonna begin from the beginning and burn everything down. No. Why don't we look at how people have flourished, how they've actually improved their lot, and see if we can ensure that those circumstances are protected. So, in the sense that, we can say in history, the world that we've inherited, there's much good. That's the phrase we say, we're standing on the shoulders of giants. So you think about your father. What an incredible journey. And you're standing on his shoulders now when you help people in the ED departments.
The other thing that I didn't talk about with my family story is that my grandmother also passed away when my dad was like 22. So
Wow.
I never met my dad's parents. And my grandmother, to make money, she was a child caregiver. And she was looking after a kid. I think it was in a pram or something. And then there was a car or some sort of vehicle that wasn't parked properly and started rolling down the hill, and it was going to hit that child. And she pushed that child out of the way, and then she got run over.
Wow.
And so I think about that, and I was thinking about it the other day, and I was like, it's kind of funny, but not funny. I mean, in the way that like she died saving a child, and saving children is kind of my job.
What you do, yeah.
And I think it's kind of nice.
There are harmonics in our lives that I think you're not old like me, but you start to become more.
I'm starting to get older. I got a grey hair, one grey hair.
One grey hair. I'm not even going to dignify that with a response. But there are harmonics in what we see as, and in your grandmother's case, self-sacrifice. Now, if you look at aspects of contemporary society, it's like get what you can, take everything.
Attention economy, convenience.
Yeah, exactly.
I want it and I want it now.
I want it and I want it now. It's like, no, actually put others before yourself. Surrender stuff to, put others before yourself. Make it painful to yourself and actually try and contribute to something larger than yourself and have an idea of what that means. Because we're quite small individually, but when we knit together societally, we can be amazing. And these are the people, people like your father's generation. Your story of him just is the fact that, his mother passed away when he was 22. His father passed away of starvation when he was 6. Wow. I'm having this thing called feelings, and as a man, I don't like it. Can you stop? So you say, well, what does it mean to be conservative? It means that you don't necessarily accept that it's all about the now, that it's all about the me, that it's all about acquisition. Actually, self-sacrifice, others, and history. These are things that shape us.
What do you think, I feel like young people lash out against anything that's the idea of like, not necessarily conservative in those values, but I guess in a way like right wing. I know we said it's not useful, but in right wing there's a lot of the idea that like it panders to the rich and the wealthy and, the wealthy donors to, right-wing parties and things like that, and the idea that actually is this hyper-capitalism mode, like making it tougher on young people. And I think it does play to that intergenerational thing where like boomers have it easy and like young people have it hard, What do you say about that in terms of the critique of the right?
I've seen surveys of young people in America where the dial is moving away from, say, a left-wing view. So if what you've described, say in many of our institutions, say educational institutions like universities, is a sort of the water that's being swum in is quote unquote progressive. When that's the establishment, young people are going to say, you know what, I've got some other views, and so if you say, okay, so the liberalism that you were describing, say when we're talking about the early 2000s, etc., I wonder if the needle is going to swing back and there are indications that that there is a hunger for deeper things. And I'm not saying that people on the left don't have depth. They absolutely do. I know many people who, sort of classical liberals, who have concerns about the world that we live in now and the way that the left-wing parties express policy priorities. But I'm not. I think we're not just in an era of change. We're in a change of era.
I want to ask you a little bit about, I guess, your own religious beliefs, if that's okay. There's this movement away from religion in most like secular countries, like the Anglosphere.
It's interesting. I think again, there's an organisation called Wilberforce that does a survey on religion in the place of faith in New Zealand, and the survey this year noted that a particular rise amongst Gen Z of spirituality.
Yeah, so I think people are looking for
People are looking for
it.
Yeah, the sense of now that there's a contest between rationalists and these crazy Christians who don't have any logic at all that is just a false binary. And if you say, there's no logic, Christian, it's just an irrational decision. Can I offer you 4 volumes of the Summa Theologica by Thomas Aquinas? There have been many Christian thinkers who think rationally and coherently, and you may refute the premises that they're based on. We can get into that, but the notion that it's actual faith versus rationalism is not true, and it also ignores what I think you're describing in some sense, which is we're creatures who have spiritual wants and needs as well. So materialism's not going to save us, and even good health is not going to save us. But there's some core of ourselves. There's this hole that needs to be filled.
And I think that's what I'm worried about, is that with the death of religion, not so much death, but you know what I mean, like people choosing not to have formal religious belief, and then what replaces that, because I feel like organised religion groups, you have a place of meeting, you meet everybody, there's community,
but there's
also the sense of meaning in your life as well.
Yeah, there's also that sense of, we were talking about the importance of history. So when I came back to the church, I was in my mid-40s, and my life superficially was was incredible. I was on TV, I was a correspondent, I was making more money than I ever had. My first novel was about to be published, and yet inside I just felt hollow and spent, and so I went along to a Catholic mass in Spanish Harlem, and was just unbearably moved, so I had to go back. And as I came through that journey, I realized I'd been thinking about stuff like, what is meaningful? What should I be doing with myself? What actually is the point of all of this for 45 years? Whereas the Catholic Church had been thinking about it for 2,000 years. I just had to surrender because the numbers weren't in my favor. And you could say, individual agency, etc. Sure, you get there. But let's agree that people have been talking about these things for a lot longer than the people who are providing some of the answers today.
So you had that experience in New York, and you came back to New Zealand. I think you did some time in like 7 Sharp and TVNZ.
I worked I actually came back, I worked in sales for a bit because I wanted to find out about the business of telly. Right. And then I went into 7 Sharp, and then I left TV about 3.5 years ago. So,
you're a conservative person, but, you've done some fluffy stuff. You've done Women's Day, I think, as well. And
I would like to say that I'm probably the only person in the world who has written for Women's Day and the New York Times. It's not easy to be that fluffy and then that aspirational.
So what was it like in that kind of environment?
I've sort of done both modes in a way, but as I coming to Maxim, when I started to think about coming to Maxim, again, I've said this, like this will be the 4th time I've said it. I'm old, so you start to think about what's your legacy. What do you got? What's important to you, and how will you spend your time? Because you realise that actually we don't know how much time we have. And what attracted me about Maxim was that I would do fewer things more deeply. Now, I used to be, I'd do daily news turnaround, 1 day turnaround. That was the thing that I did. But I wanted to think about more deeply about some of the understandings I had of the world, and express it. And you know, in media, you're often said to be part of the problem. I wanted to be part of the solution. So at Maxim Institute, we try and help leaders make wise decisions. And we do that through peer-reviewed research. We do it through pieces like the Sir John Graham lecture, where we brought out Oxford academic Tom Simpson to talk about trust last year during the election. It was incredible. We had 250 people in the room. We do an internship for young people who are interested in policy and politics, and we connect them with just these weird people. Like there's one guy we have them talk to who served both in the Prime Minister staff of Helen Key and Helen Clark and John Key. Helen Key would be interesting. Maybe that's who we need. But in the sense that Maxim does a lot of stuff to try and help our place become more free, more just, more compassionate, and more hopeful. That's the other thing. Hope. There's not that much hope at the moment.
Sadness and disappointment.
Well, there's sourness, there's spite, there's malice, there's rancor. Oh, sorry, I'm not just describing X. I mean Twitter. I don't know what I mean. But actually hopefulness, it's really important. And I think that's what this conversation's about too. Ultimately, is like, where does hope come from? And conversations like this are part of that.
I think it was, from my family, it was easy for them to feel hopeful because, they came from a pretty bad situation. And so, when they came to New Zealand, Dad came with like the minimum amount of money required to get that student visa. He worked some pretty Dad lived in Mount Eden, but back when Mount Eden was like, it was a cheap, it was really rough.
Yeah. Can we not go through several great leap forwards, a cultural revolution, and also having to go to the other side of the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And live in Mount Eden in the bad old days to get to that place of hope.
Yeah, we should be able to have hope that the future is better, but we also want the conditions to be like that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, what would be what is your advice or Maxim's advice to, one, for the government to build more trust, and two, for the media to build more trust?
We would love, so one of the recommendations of our paper on trust is that if you want to use urgency, can we have a supermajority? So that's 66%. So both sides of the House agree that there's an emergency. So yes, we can use urgency. You don't just have
forced bipartisanship.
Yes, yeah, and forced bipartisanship. Now, and if you're listening to this while you're vacuuming, and or walking the dog, can you please call your MP up and agitate for it? Because abusing urgency is not going to help us. And what was your other question?
Well, how can the media build more trust? How
can the media build? By being trustworthy. So in the sense of, I think it needs to honestly confront the fact that when we say the media, we offer at the moment we mean free-to-air broadcast TV. Probably that platform is broken. So what's the new recipe on the new platform? What is that? And that means that it needs the media, which is a very disparate group. We need to figure out how to get people's attention, but also their trust in this new environment. And there's going to be some stuff ups, but we need to. And I would say, I think in some sense, one of the great things about New Zealand is we've got a pretty good BS indicator. So according to Edelman Trust Barometer, we've got one of the highest rates of distrust of social media in the world.
Do we? Oh, that's good.
We're like the All Blacks of distrusting social media. So I actually believe that people know what's good for them.
Bad stuff on
and
social
they know
media.
there's bad stuff. It's not like they're these, dopamine addicted drones who are just heading down social media rabbit holes.
I am worried about the young people, but anyway, that's a different story.
You've got a beef about the young, I think. Be
I'm
careful.
Still young.
You're still young.
So one last question for the podcast.
Yep.
So Tim, you are a father of 4 children, so you
Yep.
should, 4 boys even.
4
So you
boys,
should,
yeah.
And I don't want to say, that there's a certain thing about genders, but you've got 4 boys.
Well, I'm
so you
such
should
a
have,
raging, I'm
you
such a
need to have
raging
an,
alpha male.
You need to have
What
an
can-
answer to this question.
Yeah.
What is your favorite dinosaur?
My favourite dinosaur. It's got to be a T-Rex.
Ah,
Tiny little hands,
with
big
tiny little
teeth,
hands.
Large haunches.
Doesn't
what's
fi-
your
doesn't fight
favourite?
for itself?
What's
though?
your favourite dinosaur?
Triceratops.
What's that one again?
That's the one with like the 3 like horns and the
Oh,
the
okay.
head, the,
Is that
the
the
fan
raptor?
thing. No, I think it's one of those vegetarian.
This is so
ones.
embarrassing. What's a vegetarian dinosaur?
Herbivore.
Herbivore.
That's the word.
Boring.
Well, your one just like scavenges for the leftovers.
Doesn't it fight? Like,
I don't think so. Not
That's
with
a
the little
scavenger.
tiny. Yeah.
I love op shops, so yeah. This shirt was from an op shop. I'm a scavenger.
That's very sustainable of you.
Yeah. I'm not a predator. I'm a scavenger.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Revolving Door Syndrome acknowledges Māori as tangata whenua and Te Tiriti o Waitangi partners in Aotearoa, New Zealand. We recognise the inequities and challenges faced by Indigenous and vulnerable groups and acknowledge our duty to work towards closing the gap.